Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudiraye. Special thanks to Avantika. As one sublime experience after another in spiritual life begins to accumulate within the heart. And the Shastras tell us that these vibrations are not ordinary. They're vidunoti. They're Krishna himself who helps us to disentangle from the material world. He actually wants us to disentangle from the material world. So those who take it upon themselves to hear the spiritual vibration, listen carefully with rapt attention, and at least to be in the same environment where the transcendental vibration is going on, will, one after another, at intervals, experience something sublime, something aesthetically so beautiful that it doesn't relate to any of the experiences that one has had in the material world. And it is those particular experiences especially that help us to give up our long-cherished desire to enjoy the material world, because, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Vishaya vinivartante niraharasa dehina rasavarjam rasopyasya prandishva navartate. That while we're living in the material world, even as we're trying to control our senses, the desire for sense enjoyment may remain, but upon experiencing a higher taste, one naturally gives up the lower taste. It's the science of the soul. Soul is forever looking for the sublime. And once he or she sees something better, he or she gives it up and takes on that higher vibration, signs on to it. So the process of sadhana bhakti entails being very patient and methodical in coming together with one's family, by oneself, in groups of devotees, to continuously hear the vibration of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, the Bhagavad Gita, and so forth, and to expect Krishna's mercy while doing so, and to patiently wait for those experiences. They may not come regularly, they may come at intervals, and they may come as an accumulation. In other words, one may experience something unusual in spiritual life after long periods of hearing or over many years, and then begin to see in oneself the change is taking place. So it takes constant encouragement, and those who are on the path of bhakti should be regularly encouraged. That's why we have a society, an association, so that we can encourage each other. Because one word from mantra who says, "Oh, what a waste of time, why don't you do something else?" As mantra influenced Kaikeyi, who loved Ramachandra, but then by hearing a few envious words was detracted and actually became inimical towards Ramachandra, temporarily anyway. So if we let in that material vibration, then we can be temporarily sidetracked. So those who are serious about spiritual life, keep a tight orbit around the devotees who are constantly hearing and chanting. They organize their space at home, at their office, in their car, so they can keep the vibration going constantly. Also, we don't know how much time we have. It's a tenuous world we live in. As the great poet Jayadev said, Kamala Dala Jala Jivana Talamala, that we're resting like a little drop of water on a lotus leaf and we can slide off at any moment. In fact, in California, we may be sitting on a nice piece of real estate thinking, what a nice house, and so forth. And at any time, it can just be shaken to the ground. We don't know when, but it will be sometime. The geologists who live right here in Palo Alto at I forget what they're called. It's the head of the organization that studies earthquakes. And after billions of dollars of research, they can tell us that at any time, it's just like being a terrorism expert. I could do that. Yeah, it could happen any time now. And there's no telling where it'll come from. But that's the nature of this world. So we should be ready and be serious about staying in the vibration all the time. And Krishna is very merciful. So the best of all vibrations comes from the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is described as the fruit of the tree of Vedic literature. Not only that, it's been consumed and then digested by Shukadeva Goswami. Shuka is like the parrot. The parrot makes the fruit on the tree even sweeter by putting his beak mark on it. And Drava Samyutam, it's actually already blended together like a smoothie. You can just drink it. And it's so intoxicating that when one takes it, then one falls down out of intoxication, faints, and then gets back up again, and then you can drink some more and fall back down. That's what everyone wants anyway, some kind of... But the material intoxication, it leaves you broke, as they say, broke, busted, and disgusted. So this spiritual vibration, however, although it intoxicates one, at the same time it elevates us above the modes of material nature. Those who hear it regularly become exalted souls, celebrated throughout the three worlds, no matter what background one comes from. So Krishna makes himself available. Krishna is a person. It's another point. We're looking for that supreme person. Souls naturally gravitate towards attraction towards other people. Especially we want some leader who has sublime qualities. In Kali Yuga we get very much, although we're very much disappointed by the quality of the leaders we get, at the same time we keep trying. People are clamoring for leadership. And even they get a leader that may be, a little more than substandard. Still, they want to airbrush in as much as possible to make the leader look okay, because it's our nature. We want to find a perfect leader. But Krishna is that perfect leader for us. Nityo nityanam chaitanas chaitananam eko bahunam yo vidadhati kaman. He's the one who can actually maintain everybody. When he says, Sarvadharmahan parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. Aham tvang sarvapapibhyo mukshayishami masuchaha. What a benediction he's given to the world. Jiva Goswami says that the devotees of the Lord, they live by these words. This is what sustains them from moment to moment. That Krishna has spoken these words, and therefore, as they accumulate knowledge, this Sambandha Gyan, day after day, of who Krishna actually is, and the conviction rises in them like just as the sun rises, and becomes more and more apparent that actually he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Their life becomes fully joyful. because they understand He's given this benediction that if I just surrender to Him, He'll protect me. And don't worry about anything. Otherwise, if I don't have that, then I worry about everything. Everything becomes a worry. Even if you make an advance in this material world, it becomes worrisome. Sometimes people have a windfall. They get a lot of money all of a sudden. And for 2 seconds, they feel elated. And then after that, they think, well, how am I going to hide this? Because the government wants 80% of it, or whatever it is. It becomes a source of anxiety because it's not our nature to handle the material energy or even to relate to it. In fact, we were reading in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam that the idea that one becomes liberated from the material energy or that one's bound by it are actually misnomers, because we never ever actually have anything to do with the material world. It's a bad dream, really. And because of my identification with the dream, I suffer over and over again. But spiritual life is a process of awakening from that dream and coming to realize what my real source of wealth is in life. We are unlimitedly wealthy because we have a connection to Krishna. And we are unlimitedly happy because we are servants of Krishna. And in that, there's a bottomless ocean of happiness within that conception. And so the bhakti yogis swim deeply within that ocean and go on consuming the vibration of the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. And the more they hear it, the more they know it's real. And the more they know it's real, the happier they become. And the happier they become, the less concerned they are with the complexities of the material world. So this is the sublime process that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us. Sarvatma snapanam, the soul becomes cleansed. The forest fire of material existence, which is so fearsome, is extinguished by this downpour of mercy from the spiritual world. And one has to participate in it to see for oneself. And how long does one have to participate in it? For a long time. Of course, we may get some free sample at the beginning. But then throughout the different phases of our life, we really do have to struggle for it. Wow, what a beautiful poster. I never saw that. It's fantastic. So, in one of the Lord's appearances in this world, many, many millions of years ago, which we have privy to because of the Srimad Bhagavatam, we can hear directly from the Lord's lotus mouth when He appears in the world. And what could be better than that? Everyone is hearing sound vibration from various places, but we're hearing it from the Lord's lotus mouth. In fact, we heard from the Laghu Bhagavatamrita recently that of all the various appearances of the Lord in this world, all of them are emanations from Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ete chamsha kala pumsam krishnastu bhagavan swayam. He is the origin of all the other forms of Krishna. I'll tell you two things that are related to this that will give you great satisfaction and enliven you so much that you'll hardly be able to sleep. And if that sounds objectionable, please cover your ears now. And if you read lips, then cover your eyes too. One is that because Krishna is the source of everything and everyone, even all the incarnations of the Lord, when He speaks, it's especially potent. And therefore, Rupa Goswami says in the Laghu Bhagavatamrita that the Bhagavad Gita is the most special literature because it is spoken by Krishna Himself. What could be better than that? To actually hear Krishna's direct words. And if you hear them over and over again, you'll see that they're perfect. You'll feel that they're perfect. And your life will then become perfect and readjusted because of hearing Krishna's words. How could they not be? How could hearing from Krishna's lotus mouth directly, the Supreme Personality of God, the origin of everything, not realign your life within a few minutes after hearing it or as one's hearing it. So one point is that the Bhagavad Gita is the most important literature in the world because it is spoken by Krishna himself from his lotus mouth. Another point that Rupa Goswami makes, and that's something that's accessible, right? Yesterday we distributed 1,200 Bhagavad Gitas downtown. And by the way, it was it was so nice to see all the devotees out there distributing Bhagavad Gitas, chanting the holy name, giving out prasadam. What a wonderful occasion. Unforgettable, right? And I was standing a little down from the free transcendental, free meditation book table that side. And I would see people walk by it and then turn around and go back. I saw one couple, they walked by it, they noticed it, they were walking, and the wife said to the husband, it was like, oh, do you want that? Do you want that? And he goes, yeah, I think I should go get it. And I saw him turn around and go get a free book. It's funny how people are so happy to donate for a free book. And that's the spirit of give and take in this world. When we're actually open-heartedly giving to people, then naturally they want to open-heartedly give back. This is the basis of the Krishna consciousness movement, actually. It's this give and take, Prabhupada says in the Sri Upadeshamrita. So, Rupa Goswami says in the Upadeshamrita, in the Laghu Bhagavatamrita, that there are various direct appearances of the Lord in this world. For instance, he comes himself. Krishna comes, and he shows his pastimes in this world. I mean, everyone wants to have some rasa, some taste, and you really get that from Krishna's appearance in this world. There have been many movies made, probably still being made, in Bollywood and Hollywood and any other wood around the world, where there's a young man who comes to town, doesn't care for the law, and just walks through the city and takes whatever he wants and fights off anybody who comes near him. I mean, there's so many movies like that. There's westerns. You like westerns? We used to say that in the Krishna book. Do you like westerns? And they say, yeah. And I said, great, this is an Eastern. And then there's modern stories of people like that, swashbucklers who come into town and they just take what they want and they're beyond the law. But you get that when Krishna comes to Mathura. When he leaves Vrindavan and comes into Mathura with his friends, he says, hey, washerman, give me some of that cloth. And they're like, no, that's for the king. He says, yeah, right. And he cuts his head off and takes the cloth. And then he goes down the street and just everyone does him favors, and the people who don't do him favors, he just roughs them up and walks off. Of course, whoever Krishna roughs up also gets great benefit. They go back to Godhead just by seeing him before they die, being killed directly by the Supreme Lord. And then Krishna runs off into the forest at night and has romantic pastimes and so forth. I mean, practically every Bollywood film in the world has some romantic undertone, right? I don't know much about it, but I've seen a few. So, I mean, the plot always thickens. Otherwise, people wouldn't be interested. That's what piques people's interest. But it originally comes from Krishna, his romantic pastimes and so forth. So, when Krishna comes to the world, he gives us an opportunity to fix our minds on him. He says in the Bhagavad Gita, Manmana bhava madbhakto, just think of me. And how to think of him? Hear of his pastimes. And remember him as the one who comes into Mathura, takes whatever he wants, who goes into the forest and plays with his girlfriends there in the forest and so forth. And at the same time, reading Bhagavad Gita and understanding his transcendent position, how these are his energies he's playing with, and that he's the source of everything. So Krishna comes to the world himself. He comes as his vyuhas, his various expansions. He comes in the form of Shastra and so forth. Rupa Goswami names various ways in which he comes to the world. But he says then that all of these expansions of Krishna then enter into the deity. So when you install the deity of Radha Krishna, the Archa Vigraha form of the Lord, Krishna himself enters in. All the vyuhas enter in. All the manifestations of Krishna who come to this world to give us benediction actually enter within the body of the deity. So when you come here to ISKCON of Silicon Valley and you see Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan, you're seeing everything. You're seeing Krishna himself. And in the process of sadhana bhakti, we're developing the ability to appreciate that Krishna has personally appeared here and all his potencies are there. So these are two things from the Lagha Bhagavatamrita. Did it help? Okay. Now, one of the ways that Krishna comes in the world, as I was saying, is as a transcendental swan. Did you know he appears as a swan? One person knew. It's big news, isn't it? God appears as a swan. And he has a lot to say. And just by hearing what Krishna has to say in his form of the swan, Hamsa Avatara, then we can get great benefit. So you want to hear it? Yes. Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th Canto, Chapter 13, Hamsa Avatara Answers Questions. Text number 1. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the three modes of material nature, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance, pertain to material intelligence and not to the spirit soul. By development of material goodness, one can conquer the modes of passion and ignorance. And by cultivation of transcendental goodness, one may free oneself from even material goodness. That's 11:13:2 coming up. When the living entity becomes strongly situated in the mode of goodness, then religious principles characterized by devotional service to me become prominent. One can strengthen the mode of goodness by cultivation of those things that are already situated in goodness, and thus religious principles arise. 3. Religious principles strengthened by the mode of goodness destroy the influence of passion and ignorance. When passion and ignorance are overcome, their original cause, irreligion, is quickly vanquished. Now this is Krishna speaking to Uddhava, but he's going to quote the story about the Hamsa Avatara just coming up. But he's giving a preamble. According to the quality of religious scriptures, water, one's association with one's children or with people in general, the particular place, the time, activities, birth, meditation, chanting of mantras and purificatory rituals, the modes of nature become differently prominent. Should I read it again? Matters what kind of water you drink. According to the quality of religious scriptures, water, one's association with one's children or with people in general, the particular place, the time, activities, birth, meditation, chanting of mantras, and purificatory rituals, the modes of nature become differently prominent. Purport. The 10 items mentioned above possess superior and inferior qualities and are thus identified as being in goodness, passion, or ignorance. One can increase the mode of goodness by selecting religious scriptures in goodness, pure water, friendship with other persons in goodness, and so on. One should scrupulously avoid any of these 10 items that may be polluted by an inferior mode of nature. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Dena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine. Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, these are it is particularly mentioned here that we have to cultivate the mode of goodness, as this assists us in our elevation to spiritual consciousness. So there are practical ways in which one can do that. Some of them are mentioned here. But the Bhagavatam says, first canto, second chapter, Sattvam yad Brahmadarshanam, that by the mode of goodness, through the lens of the mode of goodness, we can actually see Brahman. Passion simply is disturbing. It's like smoke. And ignorance is like raw wood. But goodness is like fire. Partivad dharano dhumas tasmadagnis trayimayaha tamasastu rajas tasmat sattvam yad brahmadarshanam. You can have darshan, you can see for yourself what Brahman is when you come to the mode of goodness. So Krishna is particularly recommending here that we cultivate this mode of goodness. It takes some work because, as Krishna says in the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, passion and ignorance are always fighting for supremacy. And there's never a point at which these modes are not intermingling and fighting for prominence in one's life. So we actually have to put a strong effort into keeping our environment, our mind, our senses, our body in the mode of goodness. For instance, devotees bathe regularly, and they keep their cloth clean. They keep their environment clean where they live. They eat clean food. They associate with people who are in the modes of goodness, and so forth. And by this, one can be in that fire-like state that gives an opportunity to stay connected to the spiritual process. Text 5. Among the 10 items I have mentioned, the great sages who understand Vedic knowledge have praised and recommended those that are in the mode of goodness, criticized and rejected those in the mode of ignorance, and shown indifference to those in the mode of passion. 6. Until one revives one's direct knowledge of the spirit soul and drives away the illusory identification with the material body and mind caused by the three modes of nature, one must cultivate those things in the mode of goodness. By increasing the mode of goodness, one automatically can understand and practice religious principles. And by such practice, transcendental knowledge is awakened. Purport. One who desires to cultivate the mode of goodness must consider the following points. One should study religious scriptures that teach detachment from mental speculation and material sense gratification, not scriptures that provide rituals and mantras to increase material ignorance. Such materialistic scriptures do not give attention to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and thus are basically atheistic. One should accept pure water for quenching thirst and cleansing the body. There is no need for a devotee to use colognes, perfume, whiskey, beer, etc., which are all polluted manifestations of water. One should associate with persons who are cultivating detachment from the material world and not with those who are materially attached or sinful in their behavior. One should live in a solitary place where devotional service is practiced and discussed among Vaishnavas. One should not be spontaneously attracted to busy highways, shopping centers, sports stadiums, and so on. Concerning time, one should rise by 4 o'clock in the morning and utilize the auspicious Brahma Muhurta to advance in Krishna consciousness. Similarly, one should avoid the sinful influence of hours such as midnight, when ghosts and demons are encouraged to become active. Concerning work, one should execute one's prescribed duties, Follow the regulative principles of spiritual life and utilize all of one's energy for pious purposes. Time should not be wasted in frivolous or materialistic activities, of which there are now literally millions in modern society. One can cultivate birth in the mode of goodness by accepting the second birth of initiation from a bona fide spiritual master and learning to chant the Hare Krishna mantra. One should not accept initiation or so-called spiritual birth in unauthorized mystical or religious cults in the modes of passion and ignorance. One should meditate upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the enjoyer of all sacrifices, and similarly, one should meditate on the lives of great devotees and saintly persons. One should not meditate on lusty women and envious men. Concerning mantras, one should follow the example of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra and not other songs, verses, poetry, or mantras that glorify the kingdom of illusion. Purificatory rituals should be performed to purify the spirit, soul, and not to bring down material blessings on one's material household. One who increases the mode of goodness will certainly become fixed in religious principles, and automatically knowledge will arise. As knowledge arises, one is able to understand the eternal spirit soul and the supreme soul, Lord Krishna. Thus the soul becomes free from the artificial imposition of the gross and subtle material bodies caused by the modes of material nature. Spiritual knowledge burns to ashes the material designations that cover the living entity, and one's real eternal life begins. Now, how is everybody? As right as rain. So let's take a few reflections so far before we move on to hear from Hamsa. We haven't even heard from Hamsa yet, but we will. Hamsa Avatara. Dhiraj.
Thank you, Maharaj. Your reading from scriptures, especially Srimad Bhagavatam. Your reading is very powerful. Thank you for sharing the nectar. In the beginning, you mentioned sublime experiences in spiritual life, sadhana bhakti, can come over different intervals or periods of time. So that was very touching to me. I was able to connect. And you also mentioned that Krishna wants us to be disentangled from the material world, and he also gives a wonderful benediction that he'll take care of those who are surrendered.
Wow, nice. Yeah, and it's important, we have to have these inspirational experiences. In fact, niyamagraha means to go on doing one's spiritual practice without getting them and being satisfied with routine practice. Don't be satisfied with routine practice. You have to lean in. You actually have to try to get something out of it. Otherwise, it's illegal, according to Rupa Goswami. You have to put the effort in. Yashoda Mataji perspired when she tried to tie Krishna up. She was doing her service as a mother. And Krishna noticed the perspiration and then said, okay, now you can tie me up. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, this is significant. It means that we have to try. It's not that just automatic. So, however, I will say that even if one isn't very enthusiastic, it's possible that one may not be enthusiastic every day of one's life, every moment of the day, every month of the year, every segment of one's life. But still, one should have at least enough enthusiasm to drag oneself into the presence of the vibration and at least tie one's mind to a stake and say, okay, you're going to stay here for a while, whether you like it or not. Other reflections? Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, I have a question. Like, what kind of spiritual experience ones feel or get actually? I mean, how do you identify this as
Prabhupada
spiritual?
mentions in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, one may chant the holy name of the Lord and then realize that this sound I'm hearing now has no equal in the material world. I've never heard anything like it. It's absolutely unique and fascinating, entrancing. One of the reasons we like to go on Sankirtan is we can experience this vicariously through the countenances of others who come up to the Harinam and then they look at it and you can see in their face like, yeah, that's something different. They've never heard it before, but they're hearing something exotic and they can't get away from it. And so those kinds of experiences, seeing a picture of Krishna and then realizing, oh, he's personally present here. Or tasting prasadam and recognizing, oh, this is spiritual food, this is not ordinary food. And in all the aspects of Krishna's association with his devotees, you can see a devotee. You can meet a devotee and then suddenly feel, oh, this person is speaking the language that I've been hearing from within my heart, from Antaryami. There's no difference between this person and Antaryami. You can feel that for yourself. I mean, one can go on listing these things, and one could interview devotees all over the world and say, what happened to you? And it's as if sometimes people you hear about, you read in the paper, they go out in their backyard and they see a UFO. And then they run in the house and they tell everyone, they go, Larry, shut up, you didn't see a UFO. And he has to go join a UFO organization in order to express himself. Everyone else, oh yeah, I saw one too. So devotees have a unique experience in Krishna consciousness. They feel something sublime. Even if it's one time, they feel it. They may read the Bhagavad Gita for the first time and hear Krishna speaking directly to them. These are all the great mercy of Krishna, who actually wants to reveal himself to the living entity, but does so according to the capacity of the living being, and that capacity is based on the desire of the conditioned soul is becomes averse to hearing about Krishna. And it takes a long time to wash that sloth away. But Krishna inspires the living entities to come back to him in various ways. And when they hear him calling, when he makes himself available to the devotee, then they become inspired to try to see him, to be with him more. But those are all real occurrences for the devotee that stick within his or her mind for life. Just as Narada Muni, when he was a little child, had that experience where he saw Krishna, and then Krishna disappeared, and he spent the rest of his life trying to get that back. Okay, if we dare, let's pass the microphone. Back to Harivamsha.
Thank you, Maharaj. I really am liking the discussion about the spiritual experience, and I was reminded of an anecdote in connection where once, I don't know which place, but Srila Prabhupada was chanting, and in the midst he stopped, and there were torrents of, like literally torrents of rains of tears from his eyes. And then I think it so happened that somebody they didn't know what to do, so they chanted Hare Krishna mantra, and then they later asked Prabhupada that what should we do when such things happen. So Prabhupada, it's so emblematic of experience in bhakti. Prabhupada just said that doesn't happen very often, and he never discussed about that. So why I was thinking about this, because several times Srila Prabhupada has also mentioned, and you have, and many have mentioned, that bhakti is not about magical experiences. It's not we are looking for something out of the world, mystic experience, somebody produces something or like that, but it's just that you feel inspired to love Krishna more, and you see Krishna's hand in your life, and that appears in so many ways, through touch of a devotee or through seva or something like that. So I thought that.
Yeah, and what you said reminded me that these are directly experienced by the devotee, and they're not to be publicly exposed. In fact, the Brihad Bhagavatamrita says that a devotee who has such an experience doesn't reveal it even to his own mind. Because the mind is a part of the material world, actually. It's part of the lower self. and you reveal to the mind will wreck it for you. So there's a higher realm in which we're cultivating spiritual life internally, and when these things come, it's not to be broadcast, put it on Facebook, hey, I had a dream, and just like these kinds of things are abhorrent to advanced devotees. In fact, they don't even want their own names mentioned in scriptures and so forth, many devotees, unless it's for the effect of preaching. So these things are meant to be taken in and protected, put in a protective safe within one's mind and heart, and visited under, with special guards and everything like that, not just to be bandied about. Yes?
Maharaj, I have a simple reflection. Your point about association with people of goodness, ignorance and passion, and that we have to be always trying to seek for goodness, and that's the effort if we take from our side. I could personally feel that in my own life, when I try that, Krishna makes sure that I don't get associated with people with mode of passion or ignorance. Even though if I want, sometimes Krishna makes sure that I do not get it. So it was very good. I could connect that in my life.
Nice. And just as elaboration at that point, association really means to open your heart to somebody. Just because you're working in a certain environment where there are other people around doesn't mean you're necessarily associating with them. Although, so opening one's heart to the ideas, the habits, the customs and so forth of others, think, oh yeah, that's not a bad idea. Those kinds of things, that means association. So those things, that can naturally happen because we're affected by association. So devotees, although they don't become antisocial, they're careful about how they interact with others. They keep their heart guarded. And again, it doesn't mean to become cold. It doesn't mean to be uncaring or unemotional around people, but it does mean that in your heart of hearts, you have to keep a protective lining so that you don't open it up in times when the vibrations for those who have great optimism about enjoying in the material world can enter within. Or even those who have a little optimism. We don't have any optimism at all. Yeah. Okay, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, 1, 2. Go ahead. Tie goes to the runner.
So Maharaj, along the same lines, I was saying that I like the broke, busted and disgusted.
Broke, busted and disgusted. Actually, it's a phrase that people used to say when we'd ask them for donation. Especially in St. Louis and Missouri in the South. We'd say to people, yeah, so just give a little donations. Man, I'm broke, busted and disgusted.
And there's a text from the East.
Yes.
For you. Dandavats Maharaj, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. I like the comparison you drew between the swashbuckler in the westerns to Krishna walking into Mathura.
Yeah, because I was thinking about this. And when I was a kid, I went to a movie. My parents took me to a controversial movie because they were very liberal. It was called West Side Story. Back then that was, maybe some of you have heard of it, it's a musical. And in it, there's these two gangs in New York who are up against each other, and it's a romance, and somebody gets killed and stuff. But there's this thing, the gangs go around like this, and and I saw that, and I was so taken by that movie. I started identifying with. There was the sharks and the jets, so I started identifying myself as a jet. And I was going around at school like this, and the teacher saw me, and they called my parents. They said, "You took him to that movie? He's in 3rd grade. What are you doing to the kid?" But I just remember being swept away by this romantic idea of, these guys, in the gang. And it's like, yeah, we do what we like. And then I was thinking how I get that feeling when I read the Krishna's entering Mathura. That, yeah, this is the real thing. This is where it comes from. This is actually, for those guys, it ends up poorly. for those gang people. And they grow up and then, they get a stodgy job somewhere and they're boring after a while. But Krishna, he's eternally fresh like that. He has that mood and he can actually carry it off because he's the supreme controller. So if one can actually enter into these pastimes of Krishna, enter in means to hear them over and over again until one actually begins to relish them. That's what it means to enter in. And by that, we actually transfer ourselves from the material emotions of this world that we're all seeking that fulfillment, and it actually gets fulfilled through the Bhagavatam. That's perfection. That means we're actually making advancement in spiritual life.
That was from Vaikuntha Nayak, Prabhu.
Vaikuntha Nayak, no wonder. Figures. Really from the east. I was thinking East Coast, but... Okay. Yes, who's next? Go ahead.
Maharaj, I just wanted to share yesterday that when you experience from others, when you watch them, in one of our free distribution booth, we were trying to distribute the books, and there was one person I think he was from Mexico, just my guess. He was not doing anything, he was just waiting, standing there and was watching. So I approached him, I said, this book, he said, no, And I kept on telling him, this is good and all that. He said, oh, I am only listening to your music. I like this thing. Then I told him, if you read this book, we read this book, so that's why we sing this music. He said, okay, then give it to me. So I was really, because my first impression to looking at him, he is not interested, he may be doing something else, but he was really listening the music, the Krishna song. And then he was very appreciative after that, and he gave, donation as well. So just wanted to share when you experience.
It's an important point too, because it shows that the devotees actually have to intervene a little bit in people's lives. Sometimes people say, I don't want to go on book distribution because I don't want to cross that line. I don't like interrupting people in their flow of life. What if they don't like me? What if they don't like the devotees and so forth? Well, think of the alternative, that you don't interrupt what they're doing in a gentle, respectful way, the way Radhakripa Prabhu did, to take him in the next step. He could have just left it at that. Oh, you just want to listen to music, go fine. But he wouldn't have a Bhagavad Gita right now. So this is actually the work of the devotees. This is why Lord Chaitanya says, please do this. In fact, he didn't say please. He just said, this is my order, do this. And therefore, if we do it, if we take that risk, and we go out of our comfort zone to respectfully approach people and help them take that next step, it's most pleasing to Krishna. It's the most pleasing to Krishna. Yesterday when I was, when I speak to people, I say, you've heard of stress before? They say yes. And they say, really, you don't look stressed. In fact, your eyes look spiritual. I said that to one lady. She stopped and I was talking to her and she had the book in her hand. I said, you don't look stressed. In fact, your eyes look spiritual. What's your secret? And as soon as I said that, she started crying. Tears started coming from her eyes. And we went on and explained the book, and then at the end, after she purchased the Bhagavad Gita, she said, you don't know what you just did. When you said that to me, that my eyes look spiritual, she said that most people don't see that. My whole life, I'm trying to be spiritual. I'm trying to be connected to God. And when you said that, it just made my whole life worth it. That I'm doing that. It was such an amazing thing, because they say it to so many people, and not all. It doesn't always register externally what the words are. But with this woman, she expressed it in such a deep way that because I noticed that she was spiritual, it reminded me that people don't notice that anything's spiritual. That's the characteristic of the material world. Everyone goes through it not seeing Krishna in anything. And if we just take 1 second to notice another living entity and say, you look spiritual, it melts their heart, actually, because that's what they want. They really want that. They want to be connected to Krishna. And so it's so important, this taking the next step and helping people come closer to Krishna. Who is next? Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much for the wonderful class. I like the point what you mentioned, which Rupa Goswami mentions in Laghu Bhagavatamrita, the first point, that the Bhagavad Gita is the most potent literature because it's Krishna himself who has spoken it. So I had an experience yesterday. There was this couple with the kids who are they had come, and so they I tried to stop them, and they're very nice, they're very ripe souls, and they took a Bhagavad Gita, and then I showed them how a living entity passes from boyhood to youth to old age. So then they started asking, okay, is this reincarnation? And I was trying to explain, we're not this body, we're spirit, soul. So they were not very convinced. So then I thought, okay, I had to fall back on Krishna's words. I said, just like we change, we put out an old dress and take on a new dress. And they say, oh, exactly, that's what it is. And then it ringed completely to them. So then I thought, okay, I took it for granted that was, I got a realization that Krishna's words are really potent, even though we may take it simple or something.
Powerful realization. And this is yet another benefit of going out to present Krishna consciousness, to test the mantras. Just as in days of yore, the priest used to kill an animal and then bring it back to life with the mantra. So in this age, people are compared to walking dead. And not only that, they're animalistic because they've reverted only to sense gratification, so dead animals. And then we bring out the mantra and say, from Bhagavad Gita, yeah, just changing bodies, like changing clothes, and then they wake up. And you can see the effect of the mantra. So we're doing the same thing as these priests. They go out and test the mantras and see how it brings people back to life. And when we do that, and they did it just to show the efficacy of the mantra, so we do it also, and we take the mantra, when we take it out, and we chant the Hare Krishna mantra, and we watch people come alive. We watch how it transforms. They come close. They say, oh yes, I want to go back to Godhead. Please let me come with you. Or any other of the ways in which people reciprocate. Maybe it's not as profound as that immediately, but to us it's all profound. We can see the subtle change in people when they come in contact with the mantra. Then it edifies us. It helps us to understand the power of the mantra again and again. That's why you have to combine hearing and chanting with distribution. One without the other is an incomplete protein, but when you put the two together, preaching and hearing and chanting, then you get the superfood, the super sadhana. So now, is there any more? One more. I have to tell you what the Hamsa said.
Okay. Oh, I was just remembering you said that, as devotees, we all need encouragement, and then that's why we have the society. So, in the last 2 days, preparing for the Harinam and actual execution, I just saw, every devotee. Everyone did like their best service they could in whatever time they had, and I think it was like encouraging each other, and even I felt that getting inspired by looking at each and every of them. So thank you.
It's such a big deal when someone steps up and decides to take responsibility and make sure something happens. So Shambhalangi's done that, and it's made a difference not just here at ISV, but in North America and in the world and in the universe. One person decides to take responsibility that I'm going to take the weight on my shoulders to make sure it happens. That's the greatest kind of, that's a good position to put oneself in, that kind of stress, in order to attract Krishna's attention. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Text number 7. In a bamboo forest, the wind sometimes rubs the bamboo stalks together, and such friction generates a blazing fire that consumes the very source of its birth, the bamboo forest. Thus, the fire is automatically calmed by its own action. Similarly, by the competition and interaction of the material modes of nature, the subtle and gross material bodies are generated. If one uses his mind and body to cultivate knowledge, then such enlightenment destroys the influence of the modes of nature that generated one's body. Thus, like the fire, the body and mind are pacified by their own actions in destroying the source of their birth. I mean, poetry doesn't get any better than this. This is Krishna speaking. Sri Uddhava said, "My dear Krishna, generally human beings know that material life brings great future unhappiness, and still they try to enjoy material life. My dear Lord, how can one in knowledge act just like a dog, an ass, or a goat?" The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Uddhava, a person bereft of intelligence first falsely identifies himself with the material body and mind, and when such false knowledge arises within one's consciousness, material passion, the cause of great suffering, pervades the mind, which by nature is situated in goodness. Then the mind, contaminated by passion, becomes absorbed in making and changing many plans for material advancement. Thus, by constantly thinking of the modes of material nature, a foolish person is afflicted with unbearable material desires." 11. One who does not control the material senses comes under the control of material desires and is thus bewildered by the strong waves of the mode of passion. Such a person executes material activities, although clearly seeing that the result will be future unhappiness. 12. Although the intelligence of a learned person may be bewildered by the modes of passion and ignorance, he should again carefully bring the mind under control. By clearly seeing the contamination of the modes of nature, he does not become attached. A person should be attentive and grave and never lazy or morose. Mastering the yoga procedures of breathing and sitting properly, one should practice placing the mind in me at dawn, noon, and sunset, and thus gradually the mind should be completely absorbed in me. The actual yoga system as taught by my devotees, headed by Sanaka Kumara, is simply this: having withdrawn the mind from all other objects, one should directly and appropriately absorb it in me. Purport. The word yata, accordingly or properly, indicates that, like Uddhava, one should hear directly from Lord Krishna or his bona fide representative, and directly, ada, fix the mind in Lord Krishna. This is the solution to all problems. And Krishna says it in the Bhagavad Gita, manmana bhavamad bhakto, just think of me. One way or another, Rupa Goswami says, help people, help yourself, remember Krishna. Keep bringing your mind back to Krishna. And the easiest way to do that, Prabhupada says throughout his writings, is to say, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Full permission to think of Krishna 24 hours a day. Everyone has full permission. Don't be tricked by your mind to think, oh, I have to think of something else. And Krishna is the source of everything else, so your mind can rest peacefully there. Sri Uddhava said, number 15, "My dear Keshava, at what time and in what form did you instruct the science of yoga to Sanaka and others? I now desire to know about these things." The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Once, the mental sons of Lord Brahma, namely the sages headed by Sanaka, inquired from their father about the difficult subject matter of the supreme goal of yoga. The sages headed by Sanaka said, O Lord, people's minds are naturally attracted to material sense objects, and similarly the sense objects in the form of desire enter within the mind. Therefore, how can a person who desires liberation, who desires to cross over activities of sense gratification, destroy this mutual relationship between the sense objects and the mind? Please explain this to me. 18. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, My dear Uddhava, Brahma himself, who was born directly from the body of the Lord, and who is the creator of all living entities within the material world, being the best of the demigods, seriously contemplated the question of his sons headed by Sanaka. The intelligence of Brahma, however, was affected by his own activities of creation, and thus he could not discover the essential answer to this question. 19. Lord Brahma desired to attain the answer to the question that was puzzling him, And thus he fixed his mind in me, the Supreme Lord. At that time, in my form of Hamsa, I became visible to Lord Brahma. Thus, seeing me, the sages, placing Brahma in the lead, came forward and worshipped my lotus feet. Then they frankly asked me, "Who are you?" 21. My dear Uddhava, the sages, being eager to understand the ultimate truth of the yoga system, thus inquired from me, "Now please hear as I explain that which I spoke unto the sages." My dear Brahmanas, if when asking me who I am, you believe that I am also a jiva soul, and that there is no ultimate difference between us, since all souls are ultimately one without individuality, then how is your question possible or appropriate? Ultimately, what is the real situation or resting place both of you yourselves and of me? 23. If by asking, "Who are you?" you were referring to the material body, then I must point out that all material bodies are constituted of 5 elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Thus, you should have asked, "Who are you 5?" If you consider that all material bodies are ultimately one, being constituted essentially of the same elements, then your question is still meaningless, since there would be no deep purpose in distinguishing one body from another. Thus it appears that in asking my identity, you were merely speaking words without any real meaning or purpose. Careful what you ask the Lord. 24. Within this world, whatever is perceived by the mind, speech, eyes, or other senses is me alone and nothing besides me. All of you, please understand this by a straightforward analysis of the facts. Now, these next 2 verses I particularly wanted to bring your attention to because they could offer some encouragement. There's a way in which one may feel overwhelmed by the fact that the mind naturally goes to the sense objects in this world. And it seems, as even Devahuti says to her son, Kapiladev, that inexorably I'm drawn to the material world. The body and mind seem to be part and parcel of the material world, and therefore, how can I ever extricate myself from this situation? Any inkling of truth you feel in that? Yeah. Okay, so here's the answer. Here's the answer why your senses go towards the material objects again and again, as if they were part and parcel of one another. My dear sons, the mind has a natural proclivity to enter into the material sense objects. And similarly, the sense objects enter into the mind. But both this material mind and the sense objects are merely designations that cover the spirit soul, who is part and parcel of me. Purport. Lord Krishna, in the form of Hamsa Avatara, on the pretext of finding contradictions in the simple inquiry of the sons of Brahma, "Who are you?" is actually preparing to teach the sages perfect spiritual knowledge, but only after rejecting 2 false concepts of life, namely that all living entities are the same in all respects, and that the living entity is identical with the outward or subtle body. Lord Krishna now answers the difficult question that puzzled even Lord Brahma. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the sons of Lord Brahma were thinking as follows: Our dear Lord, if it is indeed true that we are unintelligent, still your Lordship has stated that you are actually everything, because everything is the expansion of your potency. Therefore, you are also the mind and the sense objects, which are the subject matter of our question. The material sense objects always enter into the functions of the mind, and similarly the mind always enters into the material sense objects. Thus, it is proper that we inquire from your Lordship about the process by which the sense objects will no longer enter the mind, and the mind will no longer enter the sense objects. Please be merciful and give us the answer. The Lord answers as follows. My dear sons, it is a fact that the mind enters into the material sense objects and the sense objects into the mind. Thus, although the living entity is actually part and parcel of me, being, as I am also, eternally conscious, and although the eternal form of the living entity is spiritual, in conditioned life, the living entity artificially imposes upon himself the mind and sense objects which act as covering designations of the eternal soul. Please note that the living entity artificially imposes upon himself this condition. Since it is the natural function of the material mind and sense objects to mutually interact, how can you possibly endeavor to prevent such a mutual attraction? Since both the material mind and sense objects are useless, they both should be completely given up. And thus automatically you'll be free from all material duality. Pretty extreme, isn't it? But absolutely liberating. To know that the mind and sense objects are intimately related with one another. They're part and parcel here in the material world. That's what they do. They connect. That's what they were made to do. And now you're given full permission by Krishna himself in the form of the swan. He says you can give them both up. Don't worry. There's solid ground above that very tenuous platform of material enjoyment and interaction between the mind and senses. Gaur Prem. Srila Sridhar Swami points out that the symptoms of the material mind, the symptom of the material mind is the tendency to consider oneself to be the ultimate doer and enjoyer. I once had when I was doing business, had a reversal in fortune, and I was distraught. And then I talked to one of my friends who's a devotee, also in business, and he said, yeah, you just might want to remember you're not the supreme Ishvara. And immediately I felt better. Immediately, all the, whatever anxiety was there, that I made a mistake, whatever, it was gone. And I just kept that in my mind. He said, yeah, it just proves we're not the Ishvara. And this is such a simple switch to flip, but it actually turns on the real energy of the soul to remember that I'm not the Ishvara. I'm actually the servant of the Ishvara. And this is the recommendation by Srila Sridhar Swami. Naturally, one with such a puffed up mentality is helplessly attracted by the sense objects. One who considers himself to be the doer and enjoyer will be irresistibly attracted to the means for attaining sense gratification and false prestige, namely exploitation of material objects. Above the material mind, however, is intelligence. Here's real knowledge, which can perceive the existence of the eternal spirit soul. It is not possible to separate the material mind from the sense objects because they naturally exist together. Therefore, by intelligence, one must realize one's eternal form as spirit soul, part and parcel of the Lord, and completely reject the bogus material mentality. One who revives his original spiritual mentality becomes automatically detached from material attraction. Therefore, one should cultivate knowledge of the falsity of sense gratification. When the mind or senses are attracted to material enjoyment, the superior intelligence must immediately detect such illusion. I'll read it again. When the mind or senses are attracted to material enjoyment, the superior intelligence must immediately detect such an illusion. I imagine it like a little smoke alarm in your house. You know those annoying little things? It's like a little smoke extra goes on, beep, 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 beep. So our intelligence should be so tuned that if there's this, even a scent of this worldly enjoyment, this idea I'm the enjoyer and so forth, the alarm goes off. The intelligence detects it and says, this is bogus. This is totally bogus. You have a right to give it up. You have full right. You've been given full permission to abandon this false conception of life. And with that awareness coming from the intelligence, which is fortified, as I said earlier in the class, by scripture and by Antaryami himself, and by the words of the spiritual master and the example of the sadhus, who are crossing the material world without any trepidation of leaving behind the bogus realm of the material world. One's intelligence can be so fortified that powerfully it can vanquish this lower consideration of life, that where's my sense gratification, where's my prestige, and so forth. Bogus has to be given up. In this way, one should purify one's mentality. By devotional service to the Lord, such detachment and intelligence automatically awaken, and by full understanding of one's original spiritual form, one is properly situated in eternal consciousness. Rest my case. So there's one more verse that goes to this subject matter, but we'll take a couple of reflections. Manjulakanta in the back.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Maharaj, I notice more often these days that my intelligence does exist. Because, like for example, I'm driving down and I'm heading somewhere to do something, and I cross a shop and I can hear my mind telling me, you wanted to pick up that thing and it's right here, if you do a detour, 3 minutes and we can go pick that up. And somebody's not listening, because other somebody's driving that car straight to the temple or whatever service. So I can see my mind, I can see my intelligence, and then I notice somebody's watching these two. Who am I? The soul just seems to be watching most of the time. And there are these two people working things out, and I'm happy that the intelligence seems to be winning more these days. But sometimes I'm just wondering, who am I? There's so many voices, and then there's someone watching. And can you tell me, what is the soul doing there? Is it just experiencing?
Yeah, it's a witness. In fact, we found a really tasty verse in the Laghu Bhagavatamrita. It's saying that one must attain this position of being a witness. One should see oneself as a witness and watch all the other activities of the mind and senses. You may observe that lower realm. It's like looking down and you see, oh, look, the mind's attracted to material sense objects. And in the Bhagavad Gita, the verse, Puryamanam achala pratishtam samudramapa pravishanti advat tadvat yam kam santi sarve sashantam apnoti nakama kami apuryamanam achala pratishtam samudramapa pravishanti yadvat tadvat kamam pravishanti sarve sashantam apnoti nakama kami. In this verse, in which Krishna says that although sense desires enter within the mind, and similarly, rivers enter within the ocean, but the ocean's not disturbed by them. So similarly, for self-realized soul, he or she sees that these impulses are coming within the mind. You're driving along, you say, oh, there's that pair of shoes. And then you observe, oh, look, it just entered within that realm down there. But that's not me, I'm just witnessing. Another section we read, that a person who becomes self-realized, a grihastha, lives at home peacefully like a guest. That's the mentality. It's like, yes, interacting, yes, emotionally connected with everybody, because that's a wholesome relationship, but still, from the witness point of view, I'm a guest. I'm a guest here, that's all. I'm a guest in this house, I'm a guest in this world, I'm just passing through. All the acquaintances I have, all the business connections I have, this is simply a temporary arrangement that has nothing to do with me at all. It's a part of the dream that I'm actually leaving behind.
So what about the intelligence then? Is that me?
The intelligence is an instrument through which one can perceive oneself. And the intelligence can become surcharged, as Krishna talks about in the section of the Avaduta Brahman, That when one's intelligence becomes purified, it actually becomes a Shiksha Guru. One of your Shiksha Gurus. How many Shiksha Gurus do you have? Well, one main one, my intelligence. When the intelligence becomes purified by right livelihood and, as we heard, mode of goodness, and then through the cultivation of pure knowledge through the Bhagavad Gita and so forth, the intelligence then directs us in such a way that we can...
So the cultivation of intelligence is by the intelligence itself. If I'm only a witness, where am I making any choices? The intelligence sees that going to temple regularly, reading the Bhagavatam is helping me, and the intelligence works on increasing it.
The soul can be self-aware, is self-aware. It's not that we require another instrument, but we get good guidance as souls from Antaryami, from Krishna, and from the scriptures and so forth, and this comes through the intelligence.
Okay, thank you, Maharaj.
Yes.
Hare Krishna. This conversation and the topic that we are discussing reminded me when we read the scriptures, that strengthens our intelligence to make the right choices, and even the mind starts to come a little bit, you start to see things in perspective. But when I remember I used to read the books, I was not chanting, I just got introduced to a book, the Bhagavad Gita, and I used to feel the warmth. I knew that this is pure by reading it, but I did not know how to implement it, how to, really live the Bhagavad Gita's teaching. So, and I'm just getting reminded of a point that the connect for me was the holy name. And like scriptures, they really sharpen our intelligence. That combined with the chanting of the holy name, which is you have to chant with feeling, then it comes to the matter of the heart. It takes you to the next level of Sambandha Gyan, which is your mind is, in control because of your intelligence, and your heart is connected with the super soul. Together, they help, the devotee move forward in the spiritual progress.
Thank you for the analysis. And, in various places in the Shastra, for instance, in the Bhagavatam, Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Jana Yashavairagyam Jnanam Chayarahaitukam. By practicing this direct process of devotional service, hearing and chanting, then one gets knowledge and detachment. And Tashchadadhana Munayo Jnana Vairagya Yuktaya Pashantyatmani Chatmanam Bhaktya Shrutagrihitaya. These elements, knowledge and detachment, help to fortify us as we move forward in devotional service. And nice to hear the combinations of medicine that you're taking to come to that point.
I remember first time when I met Gandharvika, and actually for the Bhakti Vriksha, first thing I asked her is, how do I implement the Bhagavad Gita? And she said, slowly, and then she introduced me to chanting, and I was like, am I in Satya Yuga? I never had seen anyone chant on the beats, and me myself holding it. I was like, what am I getting into? It was that kind of a feeling. But that was the missing element. I just couldn't understand the Bhagavad Gita, although I appreciated it until I started to chant.
What a beautiful image of stepping into the Satya Yuga. This is very nice. Thank you for sharing that. Shraddha has something from the internet. Someone from the internet.
Yeah, this is it's a good story of the mind being attracted. So, just going to share. It is from Sri Krishna Purushottam Prabhu.
Oh, SKP.
My realization yesterday, we set up separate booth for prasadam and books and kirtan. So one lady walked up to me and asked for a book, and I requested her to take prasadam soup as well. She said that she was full, and I told her, just take one bite of the soup, and she agreed. And then she said that she will give me the donation soon. But as soon as she took the prasadam, she said, this is fantastic, and said, I will donate $25. This is the effect of Lord Prasadam. Thanks to the cooks and Hamsa Priya Mataji. And thank you, Prabhu.
Sadhu, sadhu. Bravo. Bravissimo.
Thank you, Prabhu, for your blessings from the Dham. And also thanks to all the Sankirtan devotees, including Shamlangi Mataji.
And thanks to SKP for his undying enthusiasm and leading the way. Okay, I want to read the last verse just to, as advertised, give you a little more taste of Hamsa Avatar. Number 26. A person who has thus achieved me by understanding that he is not different from me realizes that the material mind is lodged within the sense objects because of constant sense gratification, and that the material objects are existing prominently within the material mind. Having understood my transcendental nature, he gives up both the material mind and its objects. Purport. The Lord again states here that it is most difficult to separate the material mind from its objects because the material mind, by definition, considers itself to be the doer and enjoyer of everything. It must be understood that giving up the material mind does not mean giving up all material activities, but instead means purifying the mind and engaging one's enlightened mentality in the devotional service of the Lord. Since time immemorial, the material mind and senses have been in contact with the sense objects. Therefore, how is it possible for the material mind to give up its objects, which are the basis of its existence? And not only does the mind reach out to the material objects, but also because of the mind's desires, the material objects cannot remain out of the mind, helplessly entering at every moment. Thus, separation between the mind and sense objects is not actually feasible, nor does it serve any purpose. If one retains a material mentality, considering oneself to be supreme, one may renounce sense gratification, considering it to be ultimately the cause of unhappiness. But one will not be able to remain on such an artificial platform, nor will such renunciations serve any real purpose. Without surrender to the lotus feet of the Lord, mere renunciation cannot take one out of this material world. Just as the sun rays are a part of the sun, the living entities are part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When the living entity is completely absorbed in his identity as part and parcel of the Personality of Godhead, he becomes actually wise and easily gives up the material mind and sense objects. The word madrupa in this verse indicates absorption of the mind in the form, qualities, pastimes, and associates of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Immersed in such ecstatic meditation, one should render devotional service to the Lord, and this will automatically drive away the influence of sense gratification. By himself, the living entity does not have the potency to give up his false identification with the material mind and sense objects. But by worshiping the Lord in the mood of being his eternal part and parcel servant, one is infused with the Lord's potency, which easily drives away the darkness of ignorance. Now, if that isn't a beautiful purport, I don't know what is. But it really gives us a formula for overcoming what seems to be an intractable situation. And it also gives an explanation of why that situation exists. Material mind and senses are eternally embedded. Mind and sense objects are embedded within one another. The senses and the sense objects are embedded. with one another. And one must rise above them. And the simple way to do that, Jiv Krishna Das Ebeshwas Koleto Odukonai. Come to the enlightened mentality that I am a servant of the servant of the servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Reverting to that reality saves one from the anguish of the perpetual dilemma of sense gratification and renunciation which goes on in this platform of the material world. Om Tat Sat. Go Premanande Haribo. We'd like to thank everyone who joined us on the internet today. Please let's say Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. And to all of you here at ISV who have a taste for Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement, thank you for moving heaven and earth to make sure that this Sankirtan movement goes on. You've been deputed by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and, in my opinion, sent here specifically to do this work. So please give your full heart and hearts and minds, senses to spreading the Sankirtan movement. All the other work that we do in the material world will be dashed within a second by an executive order from Modi saying that the money's no good anymore, by an inane election that takes place in so-called free world, or any number of natural disasters that can occur. These accomplishments, the advancement we make in the material world, is altogether 100% insignificant. It makes no difference whatsoever. But every step you take to come closer to the holy name, come closer to the Srimad Bhagavatam, and to help others do so by spreading the Sankirtan movement is eternal and recognized and reciprocated by the Supreme Personality of Godhead personally. So take full heart in this process of bhakti yoga, of hearing and chanting, and of spreading it to as many people as possible. Become spiritual entrepreneurs and use all your senses and all your resources to spread the Sankirtan movement. That is real wealth. Go Premanande Haribo! Vanchakalpadrishcha Kripasanabhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.
Nachariyar Marman, Nachariyar Marman, Nachariyar Marman, Nachariyar Marman, hey! Nachariyar Marman, Nachariyar Marman, Nachariyar Marman, Nachariyar Marman.